Yes, 2-5 is here. Sports reports is ordered. Hopefully, y'all having a good day out there. Like, review, subscribe, share, rate, do all the free things. Do me a favor and do all the good things while sipping a liquid death, of course. So, today, we had some big news come down in the world of college football. So, 2 years ago, head coach Pat Fitzgerald was relieved of his duties at Northwestern. So, this was a crazy story. It just came out of the blue a little bit before that season started in 2023. So there was rumors of hazing, and we couldn't figure out what Pat Fitzgerald knew and what he didn't know. Okay, so on a Monday, Northwestern said, hey, you're suspended. We got to look into this. And before you could blink, it came out that he was fired. So, of course, being that he was fired, there was a public shitstorm and the media jumped on this and they just banged on Pat Fitzgerald, oh, he should have been relieved. You can't run a program that way. So, look, I used to be in the military a couple of moons ago, and I know it was a thing, right? The commander would get in trouble for the things that the airmen would do. So, you go get a DUI. The commander would be held responsible for that because it's a lack of institutional control. Okay, makes sense on some levels. Obviously, if I set you up for success and you go mess up, I shouldn't get in more trouble than you. We could argue about that. But in this situation, Pat Fitzgerald denied that he knew anything about the hazing from the start of the situation. So how did Pat Fitzgerald get here? Because we go back and look at him, right? He's the winningest coach in Northwestern history, 110 and 101 record. Now, that doesn't sound very impressive until you look at the fact that Northwestern is 142 games under 500 in their school history. Okay? He played for Northwestern. Two-time Bednarik, two-time Nagurski, Jack Lambert Trophy Award winner, two-time Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, 1997 Medal of Honor. And Northwestern turned their back on him the first moment they had an opportunity to. And this goes back to that old conversation where, we hold these players accountable, and the players aren't loyal. Well, here's someone that was the face of a university, the identity of a university. And without much of an investigation, they just said, hey, you know what? Hit the road. Because we live in this era today where the accusation is worse than the crime. Accusations have ruined many careers, many lives without ever being proven true. There's always money involved. We had this $130 lawsuit that he filed against Northwestern that was settled today. So here's the quote that he made after this settlement. For the past 2 years, I have engaged in a process of extensive fact and expert discovery, which showed what I have known and said all along, that I had no knowledge of hazing ever occurring in the Northwestern football program, and that I never directed or encouraged hazing in any way, unquote. Okay, so as we go back and look at this situation, it makes you wonder, because this is college football that we're talking about. I'm not going to bang on the SEC, but we always talk about how winning trumps everything, right? But what if Northwestern was coming off of that 2017 10-3 season versus what they're coming off of now? David Bond stepped in, did an admirable job, rallied the troops the first year, 8-5, fell back to 4-8 last year, and they might be lucky to get 4 this year. The only teams in the Big Ten better than them, that they're better than this year, is probably Maryland and whatever you think about Purdue just based on last year, but Purdue might have passed them up with their head coaching hire. So suspended without pay. The school had not previously talked about hazing. So it caught us off guard. Everybody was shocked. So during discovery and during this settlement, it was discovered that, hey, you know what? There's no way of proving that Pat Fitzgerald had any inclination of this, any inkling of this, that he condoned any of it. But this is one of those situations where if you're on the side of Pat Fitzgerald, you think he's a good coach, you're a Northwestern alum or fan out there that feels an allegiance to him, this doesn't change anything for you. And if anything, you feel vindicated. If you're a detractor on the other side that said, get him out of here, there's no place in sports for this, you're going to say, well, it wasn't like he was proven innocent. So we're right back at square one, which goes back to the power of narratives. You can say something enough times to make yourself believe it, no matter what it is. So if you think that this was the culture that he put in place, you're going to run with that. I mean, indeed, he was the head coach. But why stop there? Where's the athletic director? These people that went out here and fired him, the senior leadership involved, what are their consequences? Are there going to be consequences now? Because the school has to kick out this undisclosed amount of money. Now, the statement that they put out, to settle this case was very strategically written so that it wouldn't affect Pat Fitzgerald's career going forward. And Northwestern even put out a statement that said, you know what? We wish you luck going forward in the rest of your career. And I think that he will have a rest of his career. Now, what does that mean? That doesn't mean that tomorrow or next season he's going to wake up as the head coach of Arkansas, because I think that job is going to come open. He's not going to get the Auburn job, anything along those lines. He might have to go the Tom Herman route down there, like at Florida Atlantic and all that. So I was thinking about this. What kind of programs would and should extend an offer to him or put him on their staff, whether that's defensive coordinator, whether that's head coach? So I was thinking about this. Over at Kent State, you got Mark Carney as the interim head coach taking over this year. Last 2 years, 1-23 record, to include 0-12 last year. Kenny Burns dismissed due to some off the field stuff. Start off in the MAC, work your way back up. Akron, over in the MAC as well. Joe Moorhead is the head coach over there. They haven't had a winning season since 2015 when they were coached by Jeff Bowden. So they're 8-28 in their last 3 years. But in a positive way, they went from 2 wins to 4 wins this past year. UAB, is it time for the Trent Dilfer experiment to end? They hadn't had a losing record since 2013 until he showed up. And then if you're looking at, smaller big-time programs, if you will, I think Tony Elliott's out at Virginia this year. Cincinnati could be open if Scott Satterfield doesn't turn it around. I was going to say Kentucky, but I'll leave that one alone, because I feel like Mark Stoops could end up as the head coach of Iowa next year. If things hit the fan this year, Kurt Ferentz got to go at some point, right? Or would Iowa look at him? That Big Ten pedigree, knowing the area recruiting. But back to these narratives, right? So we live in a place now where if someone has some kind of beef with you, whether you know it or not, and they put your name in the middle of something, cancel culture is a thing. I know that the conservatives run with that all the time, but it is a thing. You do the wrong thing, say the wrong thing, people will come for your job. So I don't know what he knew and what he did not do. But Denzel Washington said it best, Lonzo in Training Day, right? It's not what you know, it's what you can prove. And Northwestern hasn't proven that he knew anything. Northwestern hasn't proven just yet that life without Pat Fitzgerald is better. For some reason, I struggle saying that name. Excuse me, y'all. But the public lynch mob has too much power, right? This country was founded on innocent until proven guilty. So suspend them. Suspend them with pay. They suspended them without pay on the front end of it, but suspend them without pay if you need to, but suspend them with pay until you have a reason to dock his pay. Maybe you suspend them a few games. Maybe the NCAA steps in like they did with Michigan. But it didn't have to get here is my overall point. I'm not here to litigate whether Pat Fitzgerald was right or wrong, whether Northwestern was right or wrong. It's just more of the power that we give society. I mean, these were reputable news stations reporting these things as if he was involved directly, as if he was hazing people. So in the end, all I have to say is Northwestern got screwed by public outrage. But in the end, they're a very smart school that did a very dumb thing. So look, Sports Reports is ordered, y'all. We will be back tomorrow night. SEC preview. The last of our Power 4 previews before we get into the AFC East and South next week. Like, review, subscribe, share, rate, do all the free things. Do all the good things. Peace.